special guest, Marta, who, as many of you know, works in our Polish office. How are you, Marta?
Thank you. I'm fine. Hello, everyone.
Really good to see you. I know we've had a technical issues, but that's okay. Today, we're going to be talking about mysteries, skeletons in the closet, and lies. And that is because in our work, which is really fascinating, every now and then we come across mysteries that we cannot solve or mysteries that we can solve. And what we're going to be talking about is giving people a few examples. Of course, we can't share too many details because it's all a mystery and, private. But when we were preparing for the session, we thought of a few cases where we were just completely blown away with what we knew about a case when we started and what actually happened. So a very good example that comes to mind is a client that we had probably about 10 years ago now in Australia. And basically what happened is that, well, his parents were Polish. He was born, I think, in Germany. And, his parents' marriage wasn't very happy. There was, a lot of family violence and, not a good thing. But one day when he was about 10, his father went to buy a packet of cigarettes and never came back home. It's a proverbial, father leaving and never telling anyone. And they didn't know what happened to him for many, many years. So when his children, let's call him Andrew, when Andrew's children wanted to reclaim their citizenship, we knew where the family came from. We had some documents, but we were stuck in a couple of places because some of the information they gave us just didn't match. So we reached out to all kinds of institutions in Poland based on the information that Andrew had, and Andrew told us. And, he told us things like his father was from a noble family. His father worked at the University of Warsaw just before the war. He also told us that his father was part of the Polish resistance. So, we were following all kinds of channels of looking for information. Just nothing matched. Like we just couldn't work it out. And there was one other institution in Poland, which is the National Institute of Remembrance. That was kind of our last chance. So we wanted to apply there to get information that the Polish government might have. Except that the only way we could do it is to provide Andrew's father's death certificate. And we didn't know where he died or we didn't know anything. So we started looking here in Australia, and eventually we found his records in New South Wales, and the family was from Victoria. And it turned out that he did, remarry whilst he was married to Andrew's mother, by the way. And he changed his name. He added Von to his surname. And of course, he had other children, which the family had no idea about. So through working with us, not only we got them Polish citizenship, but we also found, missing family members that they didn't know about. But what I was going to ask you, Marta, is what happened in Poland? Because, all of this took a few years and all of this ended well, where, essentially we were able to provide Polish citizenship to, to our client. But if you could take us through what happened in Poland and what you discovered.
So when the documents from National Institute of Remembrance came, we discovered that actually the grandfather of the client was not in resistance, but he was applying for a German citizenship, and he was applying for Volksliste in Poland. So it was very strange and very surprising for us to discover this. And he didn't get it because he was in jail for some time, so he didn't get German citizenship or Volksliste category. But it was we could use these documents because it showed that he was of Polish nationality, of Polish citizenship.
Mm-hmm. And of course, he was in prison for some sort of criminal offense as well.
Yeah.
And he never worked at the University of Warsaw, and he never came from a noble family. So essentially, the family inherited a lot of lies and a lot of trauma from this guy who nobody really knew who he was. But, you know, as we say, paper doesn't lie. And sometimes when you look at documents, you can see clearly that, you know, what people have said isn't what happened. We also talked about a case of Linda, who, this is another very, very mysterious story. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yes, so we had the client with the common family history, but we couldn't find any Polish documents in Poland, and our last hope was also Institute of National Remembrance. So we applied there, but I thought that we will get no more that International Tracing Service records. And I was very surprised because we get documents from the court case for declaring grandfather dead. And the case was submitted by his wife, and I didn't even know that he was married before the war. So it was like he was in Germany then. He had another wife and another kid, and at the same time in Poland there was a case pending for declaring him dead.
Right.
And I remember that even it was few eyewitnesses of his death on this case, so it was very strange. But we could confirm his Polish citizenship by that.
Okay, so even though people were liars and a little bit dodgy, or as we call them, kombinator in Polish, we still can use information that we find to prove someone's citizenship, even if they were not too honest, let's put it that way. But you did mention a couple of institutions that I would like to explore with you. So one is the National Institute of Remembrance, and the other one is ITS, which is International Tracing Service. Can you maybe just very briefly tell us what they are and what they do?
So Institute of National Remembrance is a kind of archive in Poland, but this archive have mostly after-war documents connected with applying for Polish passport. So we can write there when we know that someone was in Poland shortly after the war. And International Tracing Service is a German institution which have documents and documentation of the people who was in displaced camps in Germany also after the war. But we can apply to Institute of National Remembrance when we want to have documents from from International Tracing Service.
That's because they cooperate. They have a they've signed an agreement. I think not that long ago, and I think ITS was a little bit protective of its data for many decades actually, and it's only become available quite recently. And also online, it's become available quite recently. But I think it's a really rich source of information. And sometimes we look at people's records and they might have, you know, 5 or 6 different records on it. Every document, there's something different, like the name, the date, the place of birth. And then you have to, you know, decide which one is correct. Can you maybe tell us why sometimes people put incorrect information, or what? Not so much why people put, but why incorrect information is recorded in ITS? What could be some of the reasons?
Because people didn't have any documents with them, so they were saying that their names are like that, and the officer, which was not Polish, write this information, and I think that in many times he could make some mistakes, but in many cases people change their data because I think they wanted, like, you know, they wanted to be younger, they wanted to acquire more food, for example. So it was all kind of reasons when people change their data,
and of
during
course
this period.
Right, and they kind of did what they had to do, and it was just shortly after the war, and you know, and people also lied, and you know, there are mistaken identities. And I think I don't know if you agree with me, but in some cases we just cannot match anything with anybody, and we know then we have a couple of cases like that. I'm sure you can think of them, where just nothing checks out. Like we've done masses of research everywhere, and the only thing we can find is documents in ITS in Germany, and nothing agrees with what those documents say.
So I suppose that in this kind of situation, people had reasons to change their identities. And it was like, I think that it was something that happened during the war, and after the war, they could have some reasons for changing it. So we don't know the reasons, and sometimes we can't discover these reasons, but sometimes we can actually.
Right. So it's about diligent, you know, sort of reading between the lines, essentially, or looking at the records and say, you know, first of all, they date back to back then, so they're probably more accurate than what people's memories are, because memory is such a strange thing that you know, you're not always accurate in, and you might not even know it. So paperwork that we get access to often tells the truth, but it depends on what people have put on it, and sometimes they're incorrect for reasons other than mistake. Sometimes it's to do with people just changing their identities altogether. I don't know, Marta, if you remember a case of Kristen from South Australia, whose grandmother, we don't know who she was. I think her name was Anastasia, and that's all we know about this woman, because what she did, she assumed the identity of the first wife of the grandfather of our client. And we
I remember this.
Right. And they both died, like they dead, you know, that you can't go back and say, hey, grandma, who are you? And because the only thing we know about this woman, on one document, I think her name was crossed out and Anastasia was written instead of Stanisława, we will never know who that woman was.
Actually I remember this case, and I remember that this case came like every common case. Yes, and I started research just to find Polish documents for grandparents, and then I found marriage certificate from 30s, I think, in Poland, and I catch a trace for after war period documents then. And I wrote to municipal office in Poland, and I get documentation of the woman who have the same name, the same surname, the same date of birth, and she had, I think, few children, and she had husband who was missing without a trace. So we had two persons of the same data, and one of them, you know, was not true. So it was very strange situation.
And this, so this Stanisława, because I think I remember the name clearly, she actually died in Poland. So like we were trying to work out what's going on. The client knew nothing about it. She had no idea whatsoever. And we were thinking, okay, were they twins? Like, is it possible that there are two women with the same name and the same husband's name? Like, it just wasn't making sense at all, right? So we then discovered that actually, yes, the wife definitely 100% assumed the first wife's identity, and they came to Australia to make a new life, and they never told anyone. And probably in the meantime, he was declared deceased in Poland, and there you go. So nobody knew whatever happened. And again, we were able to use this documentation to confirm Kristen's citizenship. But I think along the way, she's discovered this whole mystery of the whole family that we'll never probably be able to get to the bottom of fully. But I think sometimes we see kind of funny information that we find. And I'll give you an example of what I have in mind. I once worked with a family of a prince, a Polish prince. Like, it's true, you know how sometimes people say, "Oh, my grandpa was a prince." In this case, it's actually true. And he was then the minister in the Polish government in exile. And when we were looking for documents, we went to London because that's where he studied to be a diplomat. So on one of the documents, so they gave us files of when he was going through the diplomatic school. And on one of the documents, it said, very clever, but very lazy. So every now and then we discover a kind of, you know, funny and pertinent notes about someone's character. And can you think of anything else that you could share with us of something really quite strange that you found, you came across your work?
Yeah, I can remember a case, but it's not funny. It's actually sad case, and it's also connected with a Polish diplomat, I think. So the grandfather was Polish diplomat in one of the consulate abroad, and shortly after the war. And I think that it was something that he committed some kind of faux pas, but it was like to feel that it is something another in this case, and he was called to Poland, back to Poland. And I think that he felt that something is wrong, so he left his wife with the children in the country abroad, and then he came back to Poland, and the door were closed after him, so he couldn't left Poland anymore. He tried to go abroad, to go to his family by a green border. I don't know if
illegally.
Yeah, illegally. Yeah. But he was caught, and he spent, I think, 2 years in prison. And after that, I think he died in Poland in 70s, and he never met with his family again.
Wow. I think that's so incredibly sad. Like he sort of in those days, he kind of got stuck in the system. So it's a little bit like, I don't know if you've watched the film The Cold War, Zimna Wojna. Did you see that?
No.
Oh, okay. Watch it, because it's about that. It's somewhat similar with what happened in 1950s and how people were caught up in the politics of it. And yeah, it talks about that. It's a great film. I also remember a couple of cases like that, but many cases actually, because so could you give us maybe some idea about what to look for in your records? Because what happens with our clients is that when we acquire records, we give it to them, right? And of course, the issue is that a lot of people don't speak Polish, or some of these records are also in other languages, like in Russian or German or Hebrew.
Yeah.
One of the things I look at is, for example, how people sign their paperwork. So I can see that if someone has a beautiful handwriting, that probably means that they are educated. But some people have thumbprint on documents, or very sort of labored, wonky signatures. So sometimes just by looking at the papers, you can actually know or learn more about your ancestors. Any other clues or tips you could give us of how to look at the documents? And sometimes people come with the documents to us. So, and they're like, oh, I've got these papers and it's all in Polish and I don't know what it is. And we get very excited when that happens, because normally those documents contain very good information for us. Is that right?
Yes. So it depends on the document, yes, because for me, the documents from Institute of National Remembrance, it's like not only about marital status and affairs between women and men, but it's also part of the family history. And it's sometimes when I get like 300 of pages from them, I read it like a crime story, you know. So for me, it's the most interesting, I think, part. But it's in Polish. Yes, in fact, it's in Polish. So for our clients, it needs to be translated. But I think it's the best source of family history, of the part of family history, and also part of the Polish history, of the Poland history. Yes.
Right. And of course, we went on a tour of IPN, what is it now, a couple of summers ago. And basically they were showing us, because on top of people's files, like the ones you've described, they also hold the secret police, investigations. for example, they showed us this glass box in which they had shredded paper, because when the communist regime was falling over, you know, they were desperately trying to destroy papers. And I think one of the things they showed us is how those shredded papers were able to be recreated. So that they also do investigations, don't they, IPN? Do you know much about what they do other than have archival resources?
So they do investigation about the history of people in Poland. So if there is a need to investigate somebody's political history, they could do these investigations. They are also committed with uncovering post-war history, which is not so available to people of some parts.
So I think also their investigative powers are to do with crimes against the Polish nation. Is that right?
Yeah.
So they look at the Nazi Germany and the Soviet Russia, and so even today they might exhume graves or look into that. They have historians and other people, archivists, and other people that try and discover the history that's a little bit lost, because you are yet much younger than me, but when I was growing up, there was a part of history that we were not taught. So for example, cutting or vowing, that was not talked about. So I think there's like a very big gap in education and investigation of history of Poland, that we still have to kind of come to terms with. And not all of it is very positive either. So I think some of it is like reconciliation and trying to come to terms with that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So they are doing the whole work with uncovering this history.
So for example, when we went there 2 years ago, they were hoping, or maybe it was another time that I went, they were hoping to find Captain Pilecki's grave. But for people that don't know who he is, he was a volunteer to Auschwitz. He was a captain of the Polish army before the war. But he on purpose got captured by the Germans. They took him to Auschwitz, and he was creating an underground resistance movement in Auschwitz. Not many people know that it's not just Jewish people that were in Auschwitz, and in fact the first Auschwitz was built for Poles, for political prisoners, but also Roma people, gay people, people with disabilities were sent to Auschwitz. In any case, he was there for about 2 years. And he escaped, one of the very, very few people. He, after the war, he was in Italy. He returned to Poland, and he was captured by, you know, the communist government, and he was killed. He was, I don't know, do you know much about him at all? His history, is that something that is now more available in Poland? Because when I was growing up, it wasn't ever talked about.
So it was that you told, yes?
Oh yeah.
And I think that for many years nobody knows about Pilecki. Nobody knows in Poland about Pilecki, but it's the work of Institute of National Remembrance that his history is uncovered, and now he's like, you know, very worth person.
He's a hero, Poland. I think. Yeah, I think he's recognized as someone that sacrificed his life, and I guess the story out of that is that he sacrificed his life for Poland, and he was killed by Poles, which is really, really tragic. And it's the political scene at the time that kind of contributed to it, and nobody knows where he's buried. And I know that IPN's been trying really hard to find his grave. So they've done a lot of exhuming of bodies in a couple of cemeteries where they're like mass graves out of the executions. But anyway, I don't know how we ended up with this topic, Marta. I'm sorry. But I think people will find it fascinating. And the other thing I wanted to say to people is that with IPN, you can actually apply yourself, right? You don't have to go through the process of Polish citizenship or go through us. Can you tell us how does one apply to get information from there?
So it is like form on the website of Institute of National Remembrance, and it's few kinds of forms actually, but I think that it's not problem to write an email to them and ask which kind of it you can use to get sort of information you want to get. And they are very nice and very helpful people, so it's not a problem. Sometimes you have to submit the death certificate of the person you want to check in these records.
And of course, that's because Poland's got very strict privacy laws, so not everybody can apply. So you have to show either that you're the next of kin or that you have some sort of a legal interest. And is that free to do, or do you have to pay, or what happens?
No, it's free. It's for free.
Okay. So look, on our Facebook page afterwards, we'll put the link to IPN, because I think if anyone's family, so my understanding is that they nowadays hold records from 1918, so when Poland regained independence, but the bulk of the records is post 1945. So if your family was in Poland after 1945, you can apply, well, you know, even if they were there before, there may be some records to do with that. But for the most part is after the war and during the war, yeah? So from 1939, I think would be fair to say?
Yes, but mostly after the war.
After the war. So you can apply it. How long does it take, Marta, to get an answer from them?
About 6 months.
Okay. And why can
quite long.
Quite long. Can you explain to us why it takes so long?
I think that first of all, they have much work, and they, you know, they are not only answer to people's questions and people's apply when people apply, but they do mostly their historical work. But I think that there could be some that could be problems with connections. So when we are looking for one person, they could they have to match the files they have in this archive. So it's great work to do for them, and I think that they are doing this work very good and very careful.
Very thorough. And I know that when we went on a tour, we got to meet the archivists, and they were showing us how damaged some of the documents are, and how precious, and how, you know, so it's not a matter of just typing into a computer something and it pops out. It requires manual search. It requires careful handling of documents and all of that. So their website contains a lot of information as well. And so we put it up on our Facebook page so that people can even try and certainly apply themselves if they want to. But believe it or not, we've been speaking for half an hour. So what I wanted to ask you is just give us, you're a great storyteller, Marta. That's why your sessions are so popular and we get such good feedback, because you're able to explain things in such a clear way. So what I was going to ask you now is to tell us a final story of mystery and weirdness that happened in someone's family. So if you can think of anything else or anybody else's family that you can tell us about.
We have so many stories, and you know, every story is different, and every story is interesting in some kind of way. So yeah, in its own way. And even the family history which is happening in or Australia or every country abroad may have some mysteries. For example, we had a woman. She was a grandmother or mother of our client, and she had a child. The child was born in a wedlock, so she was married. But the father of this child is someone different. It was different man. And I remember that the client was very surprised that we have to prove citizenship of the husband and not his biological father. So it was like very strange for him to understand what we are doing actually.
Right. And that is because Poland, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but even until today, if two people are married, the husband is always the father of the child, yeah, even if the father, the biological father, is somebody else, yeah. So then you have to go through courts to prove.
Yes, exactly. We should presume that the husband of the mother is the father of the child. So it's like that.
And I think I'll just say at the very end that sometimes, you know, we're talking about, you know, different eras, 60, 70, 80 years ago, people had, you know, it was different culture, different times. And sometimes there were mysterious about things that we don't care about today. So for example, if people were not married, we do not care. But in those days, they felt that they had to lie about that because there was stigma. And it's also true that some women, you know, went through really traumatic times. So some women were raped. You know, there was quite a really harrowing stories. But mostly what we discover actually through our work is that there's nothing to worry about, nothing to be ashamed about. It's just the grandparents were a bit mysterious because they maybe they were not as decent as they wanted to portray. So some of the work that we do and things we discover, you know, nobody cares today, but they do. So. All right. Well, Marta, thank you once again for being part of this. I think we've covered a lot of ground. If anyone wants to discover mysteries of their family, we can help you. And we can also put in touch with the institutions in Poland. You know, it's fair to say that nowadays Polish archives are very responsive. Well, you know, maybe except for Białystok and with Kielce. There's some horrible archives in Poland.
Kielce are better now. It is better, but yes, Białystok, they are lack of files, so that's why they are not responsive so much.
Because they have to say to her, we don't have anything, go away, kind of a thing. Yeah, but most other archives, if you contact them directly, they'll try and help. And you do need to know where to go and what records to search for. But if we can help in any way, feel free to contact us. And Marta, once again, thank you so much for spending your morning, our afternoon with us. And we'll see you hopefully again in a couple of weeks or whenever we have something interesting to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Have a great day. Thanks, Marta.
Thanks.